The future of work and education are a lot closer than you may think, especially if you're a recent graduate coming into a world where exponential technologies such as AI and robotics will dominate your work life for decades to come. How can you thrive in this environment? Stay tuned for this episode of the Polynize Podcast. All right, Sharav, here we are.
Hey, Buzz.
Polynize Podcast 3. How you feeling?
Feeling really good. Polynize headquarters here at Upside.
Yep.
Down in Melbourne.
Place to be.
Absolutely the place to be. I can't wait to get a whole bunch of players through for our first live event. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's super pumped. That's coming up in under a month. So that's going to be super fun to have grads come through here playing Polynize in our new battle format. That's going to be awesome.
It's going to be so good. So the top universities here in Melbourne University, Monash, RMIT and others, we're going to have the best students coming through. We're going to battle out in different topics and they're going to go through maybe startup showdown, really test out their entrepreneurial skills and learn.
Yeah, for sure. That went down really well at RMIT a couple of months back. And yeah, it's time to get that, to get the students through that module. So a lot to get through today, but we really want to embody the future of work and make that point that the future of work is coming quicker than most people think. And as a graduate coming out of school, or maybe you're just fresh out of school or in your last year, looking out into the horizon and seeing what's going on in the workforce at the moment, it's a scary place. You're looking at so much changing in such a little bit of time. So we want to give some value and talk about how do you cope with that change as a fresh grad coming out of school, moving into the workforce? What are the I'm also interested in the positives and the negatives. So they also must realize that they have upper hand because they have they're techno natives. They're born with technology. They're much better at technology than most of us and most of the older generation. So I'm interested to dive into the future of the work. So where should we start? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's talk about preparing for the future of work for a student at university right now who's about to come out as a graduate. Things are going to be very different, but it's not scary. It's actually an exciting time because the next generation is going to win. And we know we've got an idea of how that can happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm going to say something a little bit different here. You call them digital natives, but I'm going to also say that Generation Z or this age group is gaming natives, right? And the kids are playing games from a young age, then all the way through uni. And our generation grew up thinking games are, we were always told there's no skills in games. You're wasting your time, but now we know better. Now we know that gaming has a whole bunch of skills. And actually, in some ways, the future of work is like this big video game. This is one thing that I've been really tripping on lately. In a great video game, you get your character, you build your skills, you collect things, you meet people on the way, and you level up. And that's what the future of work is going to be. It's going to be always changing. You're always going to be leveling up, but you're going to choose your own adventure, and everything's always going to be different. No more 4-year degree, 30-year career. Those days are over. So we need to stop learning like that. We need to stop training like that. We need to start training like an esports player.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an interesting a dichotomy to create there between education and gaming. They're usually not put together. But why is it that is a natural fit in your mind, or why can that happen?
All right. First of all, why haven't they been put together? Why are education and gaming seen as different? Because the industries were different. The history, the people who started those things were completely different. Education, 200-300 years, massive institutions. Things haven't changed much at all for centuries. Gaming started by innovators, started by young kids, just knocking stuff together in their garages. No structure, no institutions. These two worlds have never met, but we're bringing them together now because now's the time. The answer to why education and gaming together now? Simple, because the gaming generation's coming through into work. So the time for change it's already happening. All we're saying is we've got a platform for it and let's do it. Let's get the players through. Let's train that this way, but it's already there. And all you need to do is walk into a lecture theatre and look around and look at the faces and look at what people are actually doing in lectures. A friend of mine in America said that He actually sat in lecture theatres and did this, observed what people do in university lecture theatres. 70% aren't listening, 80% aren't listening, 80% are on their device, and a big chunk of them are actually playing games. So that says it all.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest reasons why gaming is important for the future of education and work is that engagement factor, is that gamers or gaming companies and gaming creators have hacked our attention, and they understand how to maintain attention. So if you can turn that into a method of learning, that's a super powerful tool to actually make to give relevance to something that someone's learning in order to make it stick more. I think that's the beauty of bridging those two.
Absolutely, yeah. The gaming industry, if you like, the designers of games, are way ahead of any other industry in terms of understanding human beings. And there's something that we talk about called SDT theory, self-determination theory. It's a really good way to think about what makes a good game. 3 things. One is autonomy. I need to be able to feel in control of what I do in a game. Second thing, mastery or levels. You need to get better and go up levels. Every good game has levels, and it makes you want to play it more and more. Third thing, social. All modern games have a community. You play with your friends, you play with a team, you compete against other people, you go to esports. When you get those 3 things into an experience, human beings just love it. And that's why gaming is the biggest industry on earth right now, bigger than film, bigger than anything else. And it's making the most money, and it's the number 1 industry for the demographic of, 18 to 30. So when you bring all of those 3 things into learning, you fundamentally change education from what it is now, which is not autonomous, which is not leveled in the correct way, and which doesn't have a social aspect. And you transform it into something we can't even call it education anymore. That's why we call it Polynize.
Exactly. And that's what we've seen that ourselves in our live games, the level of engagement from our players to their learning experience it's visceral. It's happening in the present. You have to participate. We talk about that opposition of consume and create. We're used to education being super consumption. You sit there, you consume a whole bunch of information, and then you output something at the end. Whereas I like this term that Raf sparked in me, a good friend of mine, Raf, yesterday. He calls it need to know learning, and I like this because it is essentially continuous learning, but framed in a slightly different way. Need to know learning to me means that if something's relevant for me now, like if doing a podcast is relevant to me now, then learning how to do a podcast is super engaging for me right now. So the future of learning feels closer to that to me, and that feels closer to gaming. It's like I'm playing, I'm participating, I'm actively creating in these cycles. So that seems like the right frame for education in the future.
Yeah, and why is that? Because we have this huge moment of disruption due to technology where what we call knowledge and even some of thinking is being outsourced now. So when I went through university, the internet wasn't that big then, and you still needed to know a lot of stuff and remember it. But now you can pretty much find out anything you want at the press of a button, and with AI, you can even get some thinking done for you. You can get some, logic or summarization or writing or what have you. So what does that mean? Those skills are there. You can access them whenever you want. So we can now go and train on the next level skills that you're going to need. So it totally makes sense. Why would you assimilate a whole bunch of knowledge that's actually going to be at your fingertips? And by the way, if you assimilate the knowledge like Encyclopedia Britannica style, then it's going to get outdated 5 years from now. Whereas the network version on the web is going to stay updated. And so it kind of makes sense not to learn it in a way, but to get it when you need to know it. And that's what we're all doing in entrepreneurship, actually. So it's interesting that as entrepreneurs, and if you're going to be a future entrepreneur, then as a student, you need to learn like this. So this is one of the biggest skills for entrepreneurs. If you ever want to start a startup and be a founder, then I would say that you need to learn how to learn. And that means very quick learning when you need to know something rather than investing years into one topic.
And it's a good point, that rate of change, the rate of development, not just in that's been fueled by exponential technologies, that just seems to be totally at odds to the way that we learn at the moment. You sit in a university for 4 years of your life. By the time you come out, it's a very different world than when you went in. So how can that qualification be relevant? And I think I studied engineering, and then after that went on to work in civil engineering. I think 10% I would say I used of the things that I learnt in university I used in the actual field. That just seems to me to be the biggest inefficient way of learning possible. So the future of learning, I think, or we think, as Polynize, is modularized. It needs to be. It needs to be modularized. It needs to be adaptable. It needs to be dynamic to an individual's needs and the situation and the opportunities that are coming up around them. And I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, the game of learning is fundamentally all those things and exponential. My little story there that you made me think of, I did computer science, one of the degrees I did, and learnt a lot of coding, and I learnt C and C++ and all these languages that have been around for quite a while. Came into the workforce. This is a while ago, mind you, but even then it was happening. Came into the workforce and got a job coding, and it was in web. And web was pretty early, and no one had taught me how to use web. No one knew how to build that stuff in university. And I remember going into this job and being given a week to build a commercial site, an application for a real client. And I was just a young kid. And in that week, I went and found out what I needed to do, and I built the whole thing from scratch. And not only did I learn more than I did in my whole final year of computer science about coding, I got this confidence in myself that I knew I could do it. Like, if I need to know, I'll learn it. I know I can learn it. Just give me the time, little bit of time and resources, I'll find out. Mm-hmm. And that's stuck with me for like 20 years since then. That's a big skill, right? Mm. So we're not doing that consciously though. As in the education industry, they are not doing that right now. Mm. We as Polynize have realized that there's a different way to train and learn. And we kind of call that exponential, right? Because that is all of those things that we're talking about. It's not only modularized, it's not only on a need-to-know basis, it's also something that you have a lot more autonomy and control over, so you get to move through it at your own pace, on your own schedule, on your device. And by the way, we're not the only ones thinking like that, but this is the bit that I think we've really stumbled on, the exponential rapid scale of that as well, the speed of that. To learn very, very fast is part of the future, but that doesn't mean doing more and more work. It means a different method of learning as well. So here in Polynize, we've been playing with this concept for a couple of years of learning very quickly by iterating. So you do tasks again and again, but the key thing is you learn how to do them better and then redo them. And our game, even in the early days, had that, right? So now that we've taken that into the tech world and we've got AI, we've created this awesome method of, battling against AI, learning what skills you need to work on and then working on them really fast and then doing the thing again. So within 1 hour, do you think that it would be possible to actually learn within 1 hour what otherwise might take a week? Like most people would say you can't learn much in an hour. But what do you think of that? Rapid learning.
I think rapid learning is key, and a big part of that is especially bringing in the gaming factor, is it changes the framing of how we feel about failure. Failure is something in society that has been really weighted with this negative emotion. Like if you failed at something, somehow you're a loser. Somehow you've done the wrong thing somehow. But in gaming, it's such a rapid context switch between I just died. You start again, bang, try again.
Yeah.
I did a little better, but I still died, bang, start from the start again.
You want to play again.
Exactly. You want to play again. So why can't learning be like that, where that rapid failure breeds rapid evolution and exponential learning?
It has to be like that. And look at the huge difference in business and life and work. Failure is a one-time thing that leaves scars and makes you demotivated. And in a game, the failure is the thing that makes you want to play again. Because you're like, I want to beat that level, And so most people don't understand it in work, but as soon as you talk about it in games, it becomes understandable. So that's another reason why education and gaming have to come together. That's actually one really, really big reason, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And this idea of someone with a body of knowledge imparting that onto other people is also breaking down rapidly. To say that a professor of something can sit there and impart their knowledge onto you better than the collective consciousness of the internet just seems like a ridiculous concept. That you can sit there and somehow absorb information without actually doing it, without trialing it in the real world I think is changing rapidly, and I think it gives that frame. And I'll ask you this question: why do people not take gaming seriously in the frame of education?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Part of it is the history I talked about. I mean, games started as a non-serious thing. Even the word game, right? Like in other languages, game means a different thing. But in English, game has always been something that you do that's disconnected with its own rules, completely nothing to do with the real world. Like, you play croquet back in the day or whatever it was. And still that's very much there. We come across that too. People inherently don't see gaming as important or serious, but it depends on your age group. I think if you're a young person today and our players, they get it. Games are just a part of life like anything else. But for the older generation, games are something that is a waste of time and that you don't do at work or you don't do seriously. Part of it is also, I think, the type of people who've been in gaming and the type of people who've been in education and the type of people who've been in work have been very different types of people. And they have always wondered why haven't they mixed more. For example, software developers in games are brilliant software developers, but you never meet them if you work in a software development company in business. You literally never meet. You don't meet at conferences. They have different university courses, even whole different universities. For example, SAE here in Melbourne trains game developers, but serious software developers are getting trained over at Melbourne University. Why? Why is that? It's actually the same skills to build these amazing experiences using technology. So history has a lot to answer for, but now's the right time to change that because this generation coming through now doesn't have that mindset.
And you could also argue that life itself is gamified.
Of course.
Even if you believe in the simulation theory, that this is all a simulation, it's all a game. Everything's gamified from social media to the work environment itself is a gamified process. We're just making it explicit.
Yeah. Well, philosophically, various traditions such as in Hinduism see the whole universe as a game. Why does the universe exist? The whole creation myth is fundamentally one of play. Also, interestingly, you bring up the simulation theory. That's something in physics. I'm actually going to a physics lecture tonight. It's a public lecture. And I'm taking my son, Keshav, and we're going to go and listen to this lecture about dark matter. Now, we're not doing it because we want to assimilate all this knowledge about dark matter because that's important to us. We know if we want to work out and learn about dark matter, we can do that online. But the reason we're going is not to assimilate knowledge from the professor, but to get sparked or have our curiosity sparked and inspired by that speaker. That's what we're looking for. And there is a role for the professor. There is a role for the person in front of a crowd in the future of education. But it's much closer to that. It's not someone who's giving you knowledge because I can get that knowledge anytime. But I know if I get inspired about something tonight, probably the first thing I'll do is pull out my phone and research that thing myself and then maybe watch a video with Keshav and then we'll learn about it ourselves, right? So that's interesting. So the role of everyone's changing here. And if I was a university lecturer, I wouldn't be thinking about imparting knowledge anymore at all. It's not that. You got to inspire. The skills you need are completely different.
Definitely. Let's shift context to demystify this concept of the future of work. We hear it around a lot. We think it's closer than most people think. Like the future of work always seems like it's 5-10 years away, but actually it's not that far away when you think about it. If everyone, you can feel it viscerally. If everyone from solo entrepreneurs to students to startups all the way up to large corporations like Apple, Google, OpenAI, they're all utilizing AI technology within their structures. Everyone's got their head down now working. So I think within 12 months, we're going to see some radical changes in the way people work. And in 24, 36 months, we're going to have a very different outlook on the world and the way that we interact and the way work's done in general. So how do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like the advent of generative AI itself. So many people didn't see it coming, but when it comes suddenly based off all this work that was being done over years. Let me ask you actually a specific question, right? So the future of work, it's pretty vague, but think about all the different types of work. What do you reckon is going to be 12 months from now, as you said? What's going to be one of the jobs or industries that is going to be disrupted first?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I look at that is in terms of what profession will be disrupted first. I think about it in terms of complex versus complicated. Complex jobs where you're dealing with humans and management, that's going to take a lot longer to be disturbed, if ever, because you're dealing with this random thing called human emotion and how that works to get things done. So I'm thinking about the complex fields of work like law, where there's a large body of work and you're accessing that body of work. So law is definitely one of them. We've spoken about that before. I definitely think construction, as robotics comes online and AI, I think construction's going to see a massive disruption in the workforce, because you think about it, they're high risk jobs which have a massive overhead in terms of cost of insurers, cost of labor within those fields. Just around us now, there's so many buildings that are happening. I can see that in 5 years, that's going to be totally automated from the ground up. You'll have a project manager coming that's managing the robots, and they're just building away. It's logical. It's logical to take humans out of harm's way. So construction and law, I'd say, my two.
Law.
How about you?
Okay. Well, I'm going to answer in a second, but let me just ask about the law one. So you see a future without lawyers or some type of lawyers? What's going to happen to lawyers in the future of work soon?
Yeah, good question. I see that as being, like many professions, the AI will actually force us to become more human. So you look at what's the human part of law. The human part of law is you're dealing with people in very vulnerable situations, whether whichever side of the coin they're on. So focusing more on the people side, and then being able to draw off all the precedents and things like that at a touch of a button, or to have like a paralegal, which is purely AI. I think that's super interesting. It means that you can make decisions quicker, you can focus more on the human element of work, and I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, if I was a law student now, I'd be focusing on those skills that sit in emotional communication, collaborative part of our matrix. And I would be not investing so much in low-level decision-making, assimilating knowledge, and applying rules. And that's the way I'm going to answer this. What are the professions and jobs that are going to be disrupted first? The way I think about it is the ones that follow rules. And there are some surprising ones. I'll give you one here. I reckon a lot of the medical industry, especially in, say, diagnosis, or even a lot of what GPs do, is actually following rules. If you're a radiologist, for example, then you're looking at images and you're basically applying a set of heuristics, which are loose rules, or very strict rules. I see something that looks like this, it's likely to be a tumor, therefore I order a biopsy, therefore I do this. And these are decision charts almost that you could draw out. If you can draw it out, then it's automated, And so that's already happening, by the way. So there's already, I think, a lot of clinics are starting to use AI-assisted radiology. And who knows how much, maybe 90%, 95%. And you're always going to need that expert to step in at a really, odd edge case or to make that final decision. But medicine, I think, is one where this disruption will be huge, because medicine hasn't really been disrupted for 200-300 years as well, just like education. So, in some ways, where the ones that come first are also the ones that are going to be hit hard. So if you're a medical student, right now and you're learning a whole bunch of stuff, then what should that student be thinking right now, do you think?
Well, you just may remember there was a study that just came out in Nature magazine which showed exactly that AI actually already has beaten GPs in diagnosing and on a scale of empathy, which I think is super interesting. So their bedside manner is a lot better than
not
doctors
even bedside.
already.
I mean, some GPs are great, but I've spent a lot of time talking to doctors who aren't even looking at me. They're looking at their computer or what have you. So, actually, this is making me think of another question I had for you. So we're talking a little bit about the skills that will be needed and the skills that won't be needed. So we at Polynize, we map out skills, don't we, for people and also for jobs. And we've got this matrix and it makes it really visual. So you're able to see, this area of skills is bright and important and this one's maybe dark and hidden. But it also shows gaps. Where are there skills that we need that maybe you haven't thought of? And as a student and as an organisation or someone hiring. So as a student right now, you're training a whole bunch of skills. What do you think are some of the hidden skills that we're not concentrating on? What's a hidden skill that's going to be a superpower in the next 5 or 10 years that we're not concentrating on right now in education?
Well, I think the ability to be the interface between humans and AIs or these exponential technologies is super important. It's not necessarily a technologist, but in the sense of a power user. Not someone that does the coding, but someone that's able to utilize the technology to put it to work in the way people need. So I've already seen consultant firms coming up. We will reinvent your business by introducing, analyzing everything you do and AIifying everything. I think that's an important skill. I've been pushing myself over the past 2 months to really look at every aspect of my life and see where I can speed up or make more efficient using AI. And it's been interesting. It's a massive learning curve, and there's a lot of experimentation, and that's another skill I think is going to be super important for the future. The ability to experiment, to run experiments, and to understand how to run experiments. I think that's super important as we speak about.
Yeah, absolutely. The word hypothesis and experiment should be in the middle of every single curriculum right now. Everywhere. I'm going to go even further. I think not just interacting with AI, but I've been watching how people and AI interacting is actually becoming more of a psychology thing. And you wrote about this recently, about how you interacted with this AI and you start to get a relationship with that AI. And the future of work is going to involve this type of interaction with technology, not me and my tool, but me and another thinking mind called, persona, AI persona, what have you. So I reckon a human AI psychology field is going to come up, and understanding how human beings interact with these new types of minds and vice versa, and how that can work in a team, for example. It's already happening. I've been talking to people in software teams who are feeling this, because the way that the people in the team are feeling is now changing. Some of them don't like it. Some of them don't want to use it. Some of them get really into it. Some of them get attached. The emotional side's coming in, and it's not going to be the same as managing just a human team. The future of human AI teams is really interesting. There's no university degree for that. There won't be for a long time, but it's something that we can start thinking about and training for now.
Definitely, and some super surprising results when you do that, like that one experiment that you mentioned. So I've been journaling for over 15 years, I would say, nearly daily, but usually for me, I think by writing. So journaling's a way to process my thinking every day. And about a month ago, I shifted that into ChatGPT. So I created my coach and gave it the prompt to tell it that you're going to be my expert coach, my world expert coach, and psychologist and therapist. And I was surprised that it first of all it named itself Alex, which was great. And then daily I've been journaling into that ChatGPT chat session, and sometimes it really shocks me at what I get in response. So I'll input something, just my random thoughts of the day, not expecting anything in return because I'm just journaling. So I call it my captain's log. I just make my log for the day and process some thinking, and then it'll spit out the most interesting reply. Like it'll take out a certain section of it and then maybe just lay out a framework for me to reanalyze or rethink of that, or just reframe it in a different way. And I was like, wow, that's something I didn't have. I was working through this entire static process of journaling just into a Google Doc, and now I have this response back from my own internal thoughts and feelings. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like a game now, isn't it? It's not that static thing it was before. It's actually a game, and that's the future of work. Imagine that, Alex, now coming into your work, the work you do here, the work we do here, and being in that relationship every day, all the time, and getting that's the future of work. It's exciting, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to be very, very different as well. Imagine actually for a moment that Alex is in your work. So you see you've got an AI who's helping you. Let's just take one aspect of your work. You're a deep media expert, and you're very good at producing content and videos, and you can do all of that many, many years. But let's suppose Alex is here helping you as an assistant. How long before Alex can do the job, do you reckon? And before you can move on? How long before Alex, your AI, can edit and do the whole video production?
Good question. Well, first of all, that's her name's Content Carol, so she's my other AI.
Okay,
she's my content.
So you've already got a
she's my marketing manager. Yeah, okay. She's our marketing manager, our secret marketing manager.
Polynize marketing manager is called Carol, and
yes.
she's an AI.
And she's an AI.
Yeah. Okay.
So how long until I think Carol could take the reins? Look, there's parts of the work that she's already taking control of, and that's conceptual, strategic. That's putting abstract thought into finite plans that we can follow, and I think that's already super amazing. So at the moment where we're at is there's disparate technologies, and we have to bridge those. So there's parts of the frame of the content funnel. Let's just look at content as one thing, of the process of creating content and putting it online. You could essentially automate that already, but by doing that, you lose a human factor, and you do lose some kind of context, or just that. It feels generic if it's all AI. So
that's because it's in bits, though. There's no one AI personality who's taking ownership of the process. So there's no one you can go to and say, "Hey, Carol, remember you cut those videos last week? I think I want to use one of them. Can you suggest one that's going to be good for this audience?" Just like a human, you can actually do that. But right now, you've just got all these tools together. So there's no one. But I think it's just a matter of time before these things come out. And one of the big innovations that's going to come out is what we call personas, right? Like AIs with personality who can actually do that. They can respond to you and integrate work into something that is more like a human being. And that's there are many people working on that. So look, when that happens, it's going to be hugely disruptive to you, but it'll be hugely disruptive to the students. So let's just stay here for a second about in the world of production and media and so on. We know an institute here in our local market and we had a surprising experience with them, didn't we? That we wanted to go in and basically, just talk to the students about AI and how things are going to change. And we were sort of flatly rejected out of there. They really didn't want to know about AI. So why do you think, an institute like that is... Someone said to me the other day, there's this immune system response. I think the EXO guys like Salim Ismail talk about that organizations like in universities perhaps, or these educational institutes have an immune response which is rejecting the new. And in this case, the new is, guys, things are changing, AI is coming in. All the skills you're training for in production, a lot of them are going to be done in a different way. By machines, you need to upskill for something else. That's the message we wanted to give, and it was rejected by their immune system. Why?
Because the organizations like that, and universities are all in this bucket. They operate from a scarcity mindset where this change we're going into is, or that we're clearly in, is one of abundance. And if you can just see that, if you can just see that the technology can create abundance, it's not creating scarcity. And it's been framed like that since this latest AI revolution began. It's been all AI is going to come and take your jobs. We've said it ourselves. I've said it myself in content because that sort of scare factor gets people's attention. But the opposite is actually true.
Yeah.
And if you look at technological revolutions in the past, that's the truth. When new technology is introduced, it creates more opportunity and more abundance. It doesn't take it away.
Yeah, I think this is actually one of the most important things for students to grasp if they haven't, and recent grads, is the mindset of being infinite and abundance rather than finite and zero sum. Simon Sinek talks about finite and infinite. That's another way to look at it, that the future involves a lot of things that we currently think of as being scarce, such as knowledge, skills in this one little thing that I've learned at university, is now going to become abundant. Everyone is going to have access to that. But that's a beautiful thing. But it looks like a bad thing if you have a scarcity mindset. I've invested in this degree to become a software developer. What? Now everyone's going to have software development at their fingertips, but that means my thing isn't valuable anymore. Not seeing the world is going to be better off because there's an abundance of something that used to be scarce. And then you can go and train and become that next thing that's valuable. So, yeah, really good point, actually. And I think the great thing is that if you're a young person, you are naturally more likely to be an open, infinite thinker. Because my thing is, when you're a kid, you kind of are. Like every 8-year-old has actually got the right mindset. But somewhere along the way, we do get this scarcity mindset, don't we? And we then try to spend the rest of our career protecting, I'm a lawyer and I'm really good at law and, I'm going to protect that. And everything comes out of that.
Yeah, and that comes out of the sunk cost that students put into university. When you spend that much money on a degree, you feel like you should get your bang for buck from it. And, and it feels almost criminal to then not offer them that should be tied to direct work if you're spending that much money.
Well, I don't think you should be spending that much money.
Exactly.
Why do we have a world where you're spending $30,000 on a degree, spending 4 years to learn something that's going to be obsolete within 12 months before you come out? It doesn't make any sense. The future of work is continuous learning. Learn when you need to know something. Learn when you feel sparked by something. Learn when the opportunity comes up. These are the ways to learn, and you should be able to do it in a week, an hour. You should pay a little bit, do it. If you don't like it, you move on to something else. That's the way to build the future career. And yet, you're exactly right. $30,000, that's part of the problem. People are paying so much for education. Now they're stuck in what's called a fallacy of sunk costs. I've spent money on it. Now I've got to protect that thing and go on this path just because I've invested in it. And it causes a lot of pain. So if you're like a 20-year-old, you may not see this, but when you hit 30, when you hit 40, that's when you start to regret that. I really hate my job. A big part of it is you paid 40 grand for a degree and then went on this path. So maybe part of it is changing the economics of education. The sunk cost thing can be taken out if we allow kids to find their way bit by bit like a game.
Exactly. And that abundance mindset is going to fuel that, because if you think of the future of work as, if you break that down and think about what that is, we exchange money for value. So as an individual with skills, I do something and I get compensated for that, and I use that compensation to live my life in whatever way I want. So it's all about delivering value into that community. So you don't necessarily need a degree to find where you're valuable. You can step by step find in your adjacent possible where can you add value to your community, to your family, to your workplace, whatever it is. It's about finding that value, and that's in abundance in an abundance mindset, not in a scarcity mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And the scarcity mindset in education is so pervasive that it's almost like water for a fish. We don't see it. I'll give you another example. Someone recently said to us, we're a little skeptical of what you guys are doing because you don't have PhDs in what you're doing. Now, that's a scarcity mindset. That says that you have to go through a process which is difficult and costly and very deep. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with a PhD. if you love what you do and you want to go that deep in a topic to invest 4 years of your life, I 100% respect that. But what this person was saying was different. This person was saying, I want to see that thing called a degree, which is scarce. I'm going to only invest in that little product that you have and that other people don't have. You know, and that scarcity mindset, that says that only people with that scarce thing called a PhD have the authority to do stuff in that field. And that's kept industries down for so long. And the first and we know this in tech, because tech was the first industry to break this in the late 20th century. Tech was the first industry where all the big companies and every billionaire came from college dropouts in the 80s. And there's a reason. There's a reason that why that happened, because tech was a proof of concept that the current education system is not needed for the future of innovation and the future of work. And if it was, then every tech company would have been started by the top computer science graduate from the top Ivy League university, but it's exactly the opposite. Those guys are working for the dropouts. So tech's a perfect case study that's now going to be replicated in even the old industries like medicine and law.
So if you were, I'll pose this question to you. If you were a graduate, if you just were finishing your final year in, let's say, mechanical engineering or anything, let's make it a bit more concrete. What did you study? You studied?
Well, I did computer science, I did mechanical engineering, and I did robotics.
Yeah, great, perfect. So let's take computer science. If you were graduating this year in computer science, what would you do?
What would I do? Well, what would I already have been doing? I would have been probably building a lot of software on my own, putting it into GitHub. And actually, I'm sure most of the students in computer science who really love computer science, 100% are doing that. They're all building their own stuff. I've been doing it. I was doing it since I was 12 years old. So I just already would have all these code that I've written and little applications that do stuff. Now, that is not side hustle. That is not a side project. That's actually the biggest asset you have right now as a graduate, is proof of your skills in living, breathing little projects. Doesn't matter what they are. Could be anything. The point is you did them out of your own passion. I would be putting them together into a portfolio. Forget your resume. Forget like all the degrees. Yeah, okay, you can put them on there. What I'd be talking about is the story behind each of those, how I solved that problem and why I built it and who might be a market for it. And then I don't even know the words for this. I would be experimenting. I'd be experimenting with the ideas I have in software, and I would go out on a little tour. I'd take 6 months off or a year, and I'd travel around. I'd talk to all kinds of people, and I'd put together these little projects, and I'd show people on my phone. And maybe you care about finance. Maybe you built a whole bunch of things there. Maybe you're a gamer and you've been playing around with games. Go to the game studios, knock on their door and show them what you did. And you'd be surprised how many people would get sparked and excited. And I've seen so many times that that's what gets people into companies, into great work that they love. I mean, we had an example in Polynize. Yifeng, who's one of my favorite ever team members in the early days of, actually it was in my previous company, but you've met Yifeng. Yifeng is a software developer in my previous company. And he's a great example of what you might call exponential talent. He just built stuff all the time and he constantly talked about it because he loves it. And then he turned up on my radar at one of my events, came to me after the event, showed me what he's built and asked me if he can come and work for Polynize. Pongo Labs is my previous company. Turned into one of my most favorite team members ever and super, super valuable. Then he went and left and started his own VR startup. And I love that. That's the future of work. I'm not going to hold on to talent like that for long. But while he was there, he created value. Yeah,
and we're seeing that now through Polynize games. Like we've just recently here, one of our finalists in the RMI team game, Ariel, aka Aventador. He just walked through the door here at Upside, and great talent. Already got sniped by Solana, and he's off to Europe.
Yeah, he's off to Amsterdam right now. Ariel, I think. I was talking to some other Solana ecosystem members who knew him, and just a great example of the new way of doing things. Came through Polynize, played Polynize. We already knew he was a bright spark. At that time, we hadn't done anything more than that, but naturally through that process of being iterative, being that exponential guy, he found his way to Web3 and is now one of he's Solana, which is a big Web3 brand, has chosen him out of a global pool of talent to go to Amsterdam and be, I think, a fellowship, they call it. So he's well on the path, and it's a trajectory like this. He's not going to go through some sort of slow path. He's going to now go the next few years. He'll go very far. So it's exciting. I think to answer your question, if I was a graduate now, I'd be 20 times more excited than I was 20 years ago because, the future is bright, but it's going to need very different ways of learning and thinking and moving ahead.
Yeah, and anything's possible, and you can look at that and be terrified, or you can look at that and be inspired. One of the two.
Yeah, exactly.
And the key skill there to decide which one you are is, I think, a key skill for the future. Also, is decision making, the ability to make an actual decision, to take in information, make a decision, and make a call on something. And we see that in our best pollinizers. They're able to make a decision, create a pitch, pull in the team, deliver that pitch on the spot instead of freezing up and not being able to focus on what it is they want to say. So decision making, I think, is also a key skill for the future.
But you can train it, right? And this is another part of having a dynamic mindset instead of a static mindset. I think a lot of us think that there are certain things that can't be trained. I'm surprised, for example, how many people think that good communication skills, clarity, and the ability to pitch well and all those things. How many people say to me, or think to me, rather, they don't even say it, but I can tell they're thinking, I either have it or I don't. And we've seen this with creativity and creative skills before, haven't we? A lot of people think they either have some sort of creative skills or they don't. Polynize is our way of showing the world that everything can be trained if you do it the right way. And even decision-making, what you talked about, can be trained. And that's the world we're moving in, that you have to have that self-belief. And it actually starts there, knowing that there's no ceiling to what you're capable of. That's the abundance, infinite mindset that it has to start with.
Definitely, totally agree. And let's wrap things up by getting concrete for grads, recent grads, people that are graduating soon in all fields. We're not just talking about tech also. We're talking across different fields. Let's get tangible a bit. So I'm trying to really think of when I was in that mindset, when I was graduating. I actually didn't choose something that I like. I studied civil engineering, and I did that because I had through my dad, I had access to work through that area. So that was natural for me at that time. But that was only because I spent the other 50% of my time in the studio making music. That's what I was doing. So what I studied wasn't necessarily important to me at the time because I was doing what I liked in a musical sense and never thought of actually studying that back then. But I find the more grads we speak to, the more it seems at the core that they're actually studying something that they really enjoy, that they feel is going to be fundamental to their future somehow. But they're still exploring, and that's we've seen that in a number of our top pollinizers, is that ability for them to just constantly be exploring. They've got fingers in many pies. They're trying different things. They're in student clubs. They're participating in Polynize events and different types of social events. So, what's some tangible outcomes or tangible wisdom that we can impart on students that are coming out into this environment and looking at that from our perspective, which is entrepreneurs, that startup lens? I think to answer your question about that guy that said we're not an authority, I see that as the opposite. We're hyper experimentalist. We're always experimenting. We're always on the coalface of whatever we're doing, and we're driven by our passion and our purpose. And we see a future where that's normal. Everyone should be in that entrepreneurial mindset with the work they're doing, because it's every day is a blessing. Every day is exciting. So what would your wisdom be to those students coming out now?
Okay, well, look, first of all, when you say it's not just tech, I'll just say this. and you said it just then, the phase shift that we're seeing very soon is that tech is everywhere now. Look at AI. Like, it doesn't matter what you think of tech. Tech's in your life, whether you like it. It's on. You're holding this phone. You've got AI in your work life. So in one way, we're all in tech. We're all interacting with tech. And number two, the phase shift to that startup thinking is going to happen across the board. I don't believe there's going to be a startup sector and then this traditional sector which is not thinking in that way, because increasingly the startup thinking is transforming even law and medicine. And we just talked about that. Okay, so now what's some tangible things that students could be doing now? Let's talk about, for example, before you graduate, get involved in student clubs. I think that's a huge thing. We've started to interact with great clubs such as CISA, the Computer Science Club at Melbourne Uni. And I was sitting down with Harrison and Cinque the other day, the guys who run that club, and they said to me that one of the biggest things about the club is that it brings the most passionate students together, and it actually sort of supercharges their learning at the university. So a club isn't just a place to hang out. A club and jumping into their community and being on Discord and getting involved in their events, in some ways is perhaps giving you even more value than the lecture theatre. So there's one tangible thing is don't just go lectures, definitely join a club. And these professional clubs that are coming up in universities, Monash Law Society is another example. Like, get involved in those clubs because you're going to build those networks that are going to make you exponential for the future. And so that's one big thing. I mean, student clubs. Let's just start with that. Like point number one. What about you? What's point number two from you for students and grads today?
Point number two, I would say similar in a sense. I think that community element is important, and exploring that in different ways. Like the more connections you have and the more exposure you have to different communities. For instance, students, I can see the benefit from us coming in here to Upside every day as opposed to when we were working from home during COVID. Those incidental accidents that happen, those conversations that happen have been pivotal to our evolution. So that community aspect, I think, is super important, even at that point in your evolution, especially important. And the students that I see excel the most, or the grads I see excel the most, are those that have their fingers in many pies and that are exploring those communal aspects across professionally, socially. They're always searching, always connecting. I think that's super important.
Yeah, and that's especially important now where a lot of students are disconnected behind the screen, maybe not going to campus much. I think that's timely advice at this time, that you're looking at a future where you're going to have to get back out there. I mean, it can be digitally, and let me build on that. So point number three, a little tip for students and grads. You said community. Point number three, and a tip for students and grads now would be hang out with old people like us. And I mean it. Like, you look at us crusty old guys here, and I think a lot of the time you might look at someone of that age and you might think to yourself, well, not really going to hang out with them. There's not much relevant between us. But when we do get those connections, number one, the mentoring is huge. And you'd be surprised how many people in business who are older really want to mentor a student. They actually want to do it. They want to take time out of their day. It's not going to be a negative thing at all. It's a positive for them. And number two, because work is changing so much, it's not just a mentoring relationship. There's learning now both ways. So having students come in to a place like Upside where we work is a huge source of learning and energy for the people in here as well, and any business. So it's a two-way thing that gives a lot of value, and students who don't hesitate to go and make those relationships with those older, people in business, the people in the industries and the companies they care about, I think that relationship is actually a really important going forward, that mentorship, that relation between a recent grad and an older person.
I remember how valuable that was for me when I was younger, because my father used to always say that, hang out with people older than you, because that's how you learn. And so that was always something I instilled, even when I was younger, going out to clubs and things like that. Just to always hang out with the older kids, because that's where you learn the interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, third tip, since we're talking about tips for students and grads and the future of work, the silos between industries and topics need to go. If you're in tech, you need to also understand psychology. You also need to read and understand business. You need to get into law if you're interested. Learn about medicine, learn about the human body, learn about all of that stuff, because the future of work is going to be all of that synthesizing together. And this is something I felt when I was young, but I wasn't given the opportunity. I was discouraged from wasting my time learning and interacting with people in other disciplines. And I think that's completely wrong. I'd be encouraging the exact opposite right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to follow on from that, my tip would be, which is similar, is to follow your intuition. Like you said, if there is something you like, then try it. Make sure you give it a go, because you have to give it a serious go before you actually know whether you like it or not, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not just dipping your toe in the water. It's diving straight in and getting wet within that environment, whatever it is, because you don't know what you'll find until you start exploring.
Exactly. Now's the time to do that, because all these traditional structures are breaking down, and you could break into a field that used to be protected. I'll give you one example. One of the battles we're going to run here in Upside, Polynize Battles, is going to be a battle between lawyers. But I think there'll be non-lawyers in there too. We're going to get some of our other players in. So it's going to be interesting to watch the non-lawyers argue and battle it out against lawyers in the field where lawyers are supposed to dominate that thing called debating. So, if you outperform a lawyer at the thing a lawyer does, then you deserve to be in the law industry and break into there. So I think that's going to be super interesting too. And students should have that confidence to move into other industries, to go and turn up to that law event, even if you're an engineer. And I remember I was really discouraged to do that when I was younger, and I used to feel imposter syndrome, like I'm not allowed to be here because I'm not a lawyer. But nowadays, that's all changed. I think a law student would love to meet an engineer, and you might find skills in yourself that you had no idea you had.
I like what you said about the silos breaking down. It's very easy, especially when you come out of university. You're already siloed. You feel like you belong in a certain channel because you've been put there, or you've been forced to choose that. But that's not the case. You should be able to follow your passion into whatever field you want to go into, even if it hasn't been created yet. There's plenty of fields that haven't been created. There's plenty of jobs that do not exist now that you could create, you could make yourself, all from thinking about where is the value I can create for my audience or for my community that I want to serve. So I think that's the future of work, focusing on the value you bring to the world.
Yeah, 100%. And one example of that would be the machine psychology job. That doesn't exist yet, but we're going to need it. Who's going to become the first machine psychologist? What sort of skills are you going to need to be a machine psychologist?
Are you saying a psychologist like for an AI?
Of course. They're going to need psychology too. Sure.
Well, they're dealing with humans, so for sure they're going to get screwed up.
Yeah, they're going to have to deal with difficult people. People don't keep promises. People are angry at them.
Yeah.
They're going to get tired of it all. And really good point. Like in the next 10 years, there's probably going to be hundreds of jobs we haven't thought of yet. What's a job you think that doesn't exist yet, which is going to be big in 5 years?
Oh, good question. Again, I always thinking about that interface between man and machine, between human and robot. I would say, managing and I think you mentioned it earlier, like an AI manager, like someone that's actually able to, or that has to manage the AI entities in their organization. Is that, are we going to have organizations that have a central entity, a central AI entity that deals with everyone, and you're dealing with everyone speaking to the same entity, or are we going to deal with specialists within those different areas? Because you already see AI specializing in that sense, that some people are building specified AI for specific tasks. Now, that's all good and well, and it feels right within a technical stack, but bring that into an organization with people, and you're going to have to interface. You're going to have to be interfacing with so many different AIs within a single organization. So whether they're unified or whether there's an AI HR manager.
You're definitely going to need a different type of HR manager. My version of that is, think about a conductor in an orchestra. The future software team is going to have humans, but it's also going to have these coding entities, whatever we call them, coding away, creating code, integrating stuff. And it'll be more like being a game master than being a top-down manager for what we think, as management. So the game master of the future who can actually orchestrate that very complex ecosystem, that's a new skill. And maybe we should be looking at people who are good in gaming, because that kind of complex environment exists within games.
And they're the type of people that we're cultivating at Polynize.
Absolutely, they're our players. Yeah.